There we go.
All right, good evening. This is our regularly scheduled meeting for the CPC, Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. We are meeting remotely as we have been since March of 2020. And I will be reading for the record our script. Let me first confirm that we are all here. I'll call your name. We'll do a roll call vote. Artie Crocker.
Here.
Chris Gersel.
Here.
Laura Dorfman.
Here.
Jean McKnight.
Here.
Rick Zimbone.
Here.
And now Bob Dermody is absent. And I think Joe Barnes will be here a little later. So he's not presently here. We are conducting the meeting pursuant to the governor's emergency order of March 12th, 2020, allowing us to meet remotely as long as there is public access afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of our meeting. So we are not required to have an open meeting in an actual physical location, as long as all members of the public are allowed and encouraged to participate through this remote application. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public input. We are convening by Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join in. And please note that this meeting is being recorded and some attendees are participating by video conference. So be aware that other folks may see you, and take care not to screen share your computer because anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All the materials for this evening have been provided to you, and it really just consists of tonight's agenda. And we will, let's turn now to our agenda. First item is under Chairman's updates. The one update that I do have is that I've learned through Reg Foster and an email that he sent to the town clerk and our town manager that he has been appointed as the representative on behalf of the Housing Authority to be on the Community Preservation Committee. And that Penny Kirk, there was a resolution passed and Penny Kirk resigned her position from CPC. So Reg should be joining us by the next meeting. That's what I would anticipate. Okay. Our next item is our schedule for future meetings, and Cecilia, I guess we can continue to meet on our Wednesday nights. Is that what we're going to do? I think that I would propose Wednesdays is what our regular meeting night. 7 p.m. seems to be working for everyone, a little earlier than what we usually do. And I think for the time being, we probably should continue to meet by Zoom. How does the committee feel about that? Opinions? Anyone in favor? I'm going to call on you. Artie, do you want to continue to meet by Zoom?
I'm fine doing that at this point. All honest, I'm fine doing that right now. At some point, I think there'll be a benefit going back. But in all honesty, I mean, I don't want to start meeting in person right now.
You don't want to what?
No, I don't want to start meeting in person right now. I'd rather stay with Zoom right now.
Okay. And Chris, how do you feel about that?
I'm kind of with Artie. Like, I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it right now. Let's just keep on doing Zoom. I think when we get closer to like December, when the articles and the, requests start coming in, that's when we're kind of going to need to meet together. But for right now, for the next few months, I'm fine with Zoom.
Okay. And Laura?
That's fine with me.
Okay. Rick, how about you?
I don't have a problem with it. I can do it this way, I can do it the other way. I'd probably suggest that we wait until after town meeting. That'll kind of set the stage for everyone. If we have town meeting up at Powers Hall, then people at that point will probably feel a little more comfortable unless we get another pandemic show up.
Okay. All right. So let's see, our next, we probably will have a meeting in September because we'll be able to kind of report out to you what's happening with this joint committee concerning our capital expenditures and how Emery Grover fits in. I'm going to let Rick actually report to you what the results of what our last meeting was. So we probably will have a meeting in September. And I guess the question is, do we want to meet in October or November? I'm going to, I think it makes some sense, but we can maybe discuss that as we progress through the agenda. Is that all right with everyone, or does everyone have a strong opinion that we should just continue to meet monthly? September, October, November, December, we're really going to pick up steam with our work. Opinion.
Okay, when do the applications go out, Peter?
In December, are they December 1, Cecilia?
Yes, I believe so. Confirm, but that.
It's December 1.
Okay,
Okay. So what we could take a hiatus of October and November if that's what we wanted to do. And that may make sense depending on it. Yeah, that may make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's move on and we'll get a sense of what we want to do in terms of our next 2 months after we discuss the next items on our agenda. The next.
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Yes.
Jean. I've been having intermittent connection problems with my computer, and that's happening tonight. If it happens again, I'm going to, I guess, switch to my phone and try to connect through my phone. I hope that I'm able to continue as part of the meeting. I'm very sorry this is happening. So we'll see how it goes.
All right, and Jean, did you hear, do you want to make a comment on anything that you heard while you're offline?
Only, I understand you're talking about the schedule and that Wednesday night at 7 is generally good, and I agree, that's generally good for me. And all I need to know is what is the meeting schedule going forward, because I do have other involvements and I just want to work around them.
Okay, and we're talking about whether or not we should meet by Zoom, and I think that Rick, who weighed in last, suggested let's wait and see what happens. We can continue with Zoom, but let's wait and see what happens with our town meeting. And if we're actually meeting in Powers Hall, that may kind of change everyone's view on whether or not we should be meeting in person or not. You have an opinion about that?
No, either works for me.
Okay.
Except tonight. I'm having a problem with the Zoom, but generally.
All right, so now I see that Joe Barnes is on. Let's see. Okay, Joe is here. That's good. So let's let the record reflect that Joe's joined our meeting. We can catch you up quickly. We are actually discussing whether or not to meet by Zoom or in person. And basically we're gonna discuss that after town meeting. We're going to see if we're going to meet in person. And we're going to see how we're doing at town meeting and whether or not we meet in person at Powers Hall. So, okay, Joe. If we meet on Zoom, we're going to continue on Wednesday nights. We are going to continue to schedule Wednesday night meetings, 7 o'clock. And really the open question is whether or not it's Zoom or in person. Cecilia?
Real quick, are we going to keep with approximately the third Wednesday of the month, just once a month until we get applications in and then it picks up?
Yes.
Okay, so just to confirm, that's September 15th, October 20th, and November 17th. And I can send this all out, but just to have it in the notes.
Okay.
When you spoke of a hiatus in October and November.
We may have, we had talked about a hiatus potentially of not meeting in October, in November. It's really, and so, but let's talk about that now because we're really the only thing that will be going on. Well, let's continue that discussion after we lay out what the issues are that we've been working on this summer, because the next item up is our Needham CPC Plan update. And then we're also going to talk about Emery Grover, because remember, one of the main reasons why we were meeting this summer was to kind of keep the committee idling working in anticipation of an October application related to Emery Grover. So we're going to talk about that. So first, CPC plan update. You saw that we had, on behalf of the committee, I had communicated to the various departments, asked them for their input, explained to them what the issues were in terms of updating the plan. And it basically asked them to put this on their agenda, which was we need updates concerning the goals and their needs, their goals, and then work from there in terms of determining any changes that we want to make for factors for consideration for funding with respect to each of the particular funding groups. One idea that we had talked about was hiring a consultant to help us. Cecilia's done a little research on that, and basically what we've heard back from the Community Preservation Alliance is that there were some consultants who did this work in the past, but for the most part, this is one of those things that CPC staff, members, staff, and the planning department of towns work on.
I
So
keep losing my connection. Somehow I can hear them.
so with that,
Yes.
with that,
Can I use
I think that
this instead?
what we need to do is pivot and talk to
I'm
probably
sorry.
Lee Newman and Karen Sonnenborg, but primarily Lee Newman.
Peter, one
Just
second.
one zoom in the same way you do on the computer.
We can hear you. Gene, we can hear you. So if you want to just turn off your video, okay, she's gone. Anyway, I was
That's
hearing.
good. That was helpful, Artie. Thank you.
Sorry, Peter.
No, Artie, that was really helpful, actually. So, well, I think the next step is for me and Jean to talk to Lee Newman and see if there is bandwidth, if you will, in her department to help us in revising our plan. That's basically it. So follow up with our email that we sent out to all departments. And then from there, Jean and I can contact Lee Newman, see if we could sit down and meet with her and talk to her about whether or not what role the planning department can play in assisting us in updating the plan. Okay. So that's my update on CPC, and that's actually is kind of the update on Nuwari as well, because we're trying to integrate the Nuwari principles into our goals and our plans, and we have to do that. We think we should do that with our CPC plan.
Hey, Peter, could I verify what you meant by having Lee Newman in that department help us update our plans? Update work plans.
Update what?
What plans are they helping us update?
So the CPC has a plan, our CPC plan. And so, and this is related to the email that I had sent out at the beginning of the month after our discussion of our last meeting. So what I did was send out an email to the various departments that represent the recipients of funds from CPC. So those responsible for making requests for open space, recreational resources, affordable housing, preservation of historic resources. And what we're asking is, but our plan has a statement of need and goals. And so that statement of need and the goals needs to be updated with respect to each of those: housing, open space, recreation. What I'd like to do is use the resources of the planning department. It's kind of a logical department to kind of deal with those issues, and see if if they have resources available to assist us in putting together that data, drawing that data from these various stakeholders and putting it into our plan.
Thanks, Pete.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So with that, that's my update, which is I think the next thing that I need to do with Gene McKnight is talk to the planning department and see what we can do to move this forward and get some town resources to help us on. Any questions or comments? Artie's already had his question. Any other questions or comments? No. Laura.
I don't remember the correspondence. Did you give a deadline by which you wanted some feedback or no?
No.
And what are we expecting for timing on it?
What I asked in that email was for those committees to put that on their fall docket, that that we were
Okay.
working. Yeah. So I asked that they put it on their fall docket. I thought it would be a little presumptuous of me to actually give them a deadline to do something. So I think that it's one of these things where we're just going to have to lean into it. I think that's the way I view it. Okay. We don't really have any power to enforce anything, right? So I think we just need to lean. Any other comments or questions?
Peter?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Rick. I think you might want to consider for the fall, not immediately, but you may want to consider a request to the select board and to the finance committee to appear before them and ask for their input.
We had intended on doing that, and that's a good reminder. I think that we're going to interact with the select board early and then kind of later as well, but I think that makes sense. We could, it makes sense a lot for the select board. I don't know that it makes sense for finance committee, but I'm open to that because we have to consult with them on our plans each year, right? So I think it makes logical sense.
Yeah.
All right, so the question really for you though is, when do we consult with them? Because really we need to have data. We need to have we need data from recreation, from open space, from, we need data. We need to know what the current state of affairs are, what our current needs are with respect to each of these particular areas, and what the goals are for each of the stakeholders in those particular areas. I don't know that it makes sense for us to talk to the select board or finance committee at this point. Might.
I would suggest just a public appearance before those two groups.
Okay.
Rather than just a letter, just appear before them and just 5 minutes, 10 minutes at their meeting, letting them know that we're embarking on this. They may have gotten the letter, they may not have read it. And just ask for any preliminary input, describe what we're trying to do and thank them and tell them we'll get back to them after we get input from the various constituencies.
Okay, that's good. That's a great idea. And I'm willing to do that. I'll work on my presentation. I'll smooth it out a little bit and we'll be ready to go. Okay,
just a suggestion.
No, it's good. Rick, it's a good suggestion. Really is. Excellent. Okay. Any other ideas or suggestions? No. Okay. All right. So now we're on to, so I've kind of folded in both our revisions to our plan and implementing new RE principles. I think those two are kind of interlocked. So I want to move on now to Emery Grover update. And Rick and I both attended the last combined joint meeting of the various finance related committees concerning the capital planning for the school committee. And I'm going to turn it over to Rick to do an update. Rick, can you provide an update to our committee?
Sure, Peter. Basically, the meeting evolved around, given the current state of affairs in the world with respect to real estate and land availability and lease availability, should they go back and take a look at one final time what's needed as far as Emery Grover is concerned, or at least school administration, not necessarily the building. What's needed on a temporary basis and on a long-term basis. There was a lot of discussion about what's the priority of the town. Is it Mitchell School? Is it Pollard? Is it the Emery Grover building itself? Folded into that was also a discussion about a new DPW complex that gets mentioned but doesn't get much attention. It's on the capital plan. And Dave Davison presented a rather extensive capital plan. And it basically boils down to establishing priorities. Which one is the priority and which one would the town be most likely to get MSBA funding for, which school? And it seems to be shifting the focus. And so it kind of threw Emery Grover, or the use of Emery Grover, back up in the air, to which people, said, well, we need to do something for the employees. It's a disaster. People can't be in there. Actually, people can't be in there. They shouldn't have been in there for the last 10 years, but that's neither here nor there. They are what they are now. So they talked about, maybe doing something on a temporary basis, what it would cost to do that. They decided to redo a real estate analysis based on the current real estate rates in the market on a short-term basis, short-term being 3 to 5 years, and compare that to just as a temporary solution while they made some decisions on the priorities of the schools and what's likely to be funded first by MSBA. Is it Pollard? Is it Mitchell? They have to go back and get some guidance from those folks. So there's a number of things that were talked about in consideration, none of which has anything to do with us. And so we sat there and we continued to listen, and they continued to talk. And what happened was that, they just kind of ended the meeting. They brought us in at the end, and we, talked for a few minutes, and we said, yeah, fine, let us know what you want to do. And it became obvious that somewhere during the course of the meeting, Dave Davidson had mentioned to everybody in the meeting that they weren't going to seek funding from the CPC for the design funds. And it kind of, everybody had glossed over. So after the meeting, everybody circled back, and it was determined that they weren't going to seek funds from us in the fall for the fall town meeting. That they were going to, if they were going to go forward with the design phase, that would be funded from another source, basically free cash, because there's a large source of free cash coming into play this fall, and that they wouldn't be coming to the CPC to fund any of that, which makes sense, which probably eliminates any controversy about, well, if you fund the design with CPC, does that automatically mean that you need to fund construction? Are we pre-assuming some things? So the bottom line is that we have absolutely no role moving into this fall's town meeting. And if town meeting approves the design funds, which they're talking about adding a warrant article to seek funding for the design of the Emery Grover building, that they won't be, the funding source won't be CPC money or CPA money, it will be free cash. And we will not get an application from them until our normal cycle, in which case they'll come to us looking for 6 million or whatever it is they're going to come look for us for. So all of this has kind of been just shuttled to the back burner as far as we're concerned until the spring. And that's kind of it, unless I missed something, Peter.
No, I think that's it. All right, Laura.
What is the funding source you talked about? MSBA, MS, I'm not sure if I have the
Oh,
acronym. What is that? Rick?
Joe, you want to talk about MSBA?
Massachusetts School Building Association, and they take applications for projects, town projects, school projects in various communities, and they reimburse based on a certain percentage of the need of the town. So we've benefited a great deal over the years from school buildings based on solid applications made by us to the MSBA. And they've got a lot of money, and they're very careful about how they designate it to various communities. But we've been the beneficiaries as has other towns. So that's what
So
the,
that's how all these like new high schools are getting built, is the funding, partially with that funding source.
partly with that funding, right, right.
Thank
In a
you.
town that is much more able to pay their bills, they probably are not going to get as much funding as towns that are very, very needy. So,
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
just-
go ahead, Joe.
just quickly, following up on what Rick had to say, I spoke with a finance committee member, kind of off the record, and he pretty much concurred with what Rick has said. His words were that we have no appetite for funding a project at Emery Grover. So he thinks that the schools, the needs are greater than the refurbishing or the rebuilding of Emery Grover, and the schools would get more of a priority as far as the FinCom is concerned.
Okay. That actually, it should be appetite for supporting funding. They don't fund anything.
Correct. My mistake.
So
Yep.
Okay. So yes, I think that there is some open question about what the finance committee is going to support. And but in that meeting, I will tell you that the school committee was pretty adamant about the need for a new school administration environment, and whether it's renting space or starting down the path of rebuilding and potentially just you going into Hillside as very much a temporary space, right, Rick?
Yeah, that's correct. One other, it's kind of a subtle point for those who are financial nerds, and there's probably a couple of us here. But if you sign a lease for the 3 to 5 year period, that's considered debt, and it has to be reflected that way on the town's accounting system.
Yeah, and actually, just so the committee knows this, it's one of the main reasons why this joint committee is meeting is because these capital needs by the school committee are substantial, and they would, and based on the analysis that has been and the models that have been run, they're going to exceed the kind of debt limits that we normally use as the guide rails here in the town, without going into much greater detail than that. And so that's kind of the actual that's causing this great discussion, and there may be some disagreement between committees as a result of that. But that's really why they're meeting. And our role in all of that is essentially that we're a supplemental or additional source of funding for a historic building, and that historic building in this case would be Emery Grover. So that would provide some financial assistance to the school committee in obtaining one of its goals, which is an updated administration building. Is that a fair statement, Rick?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And it's just, without boring it, I'm sure as those of us who town meeting members often hear the finance committee talk about the 3% debt levy and the 10% debt levy. And those are the numbers that are being exceeded by any major capital program going forward. So that's what they're concerned about.
So Jean, I see, are you back on and can you hear us?
Yes, I'm using my phone now. I've given up on the computer, but I can hear you. And can you see and hear me?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, great.
We can't even tell the difference between what your laptop and the phone. So
Okay,
okay.
great.
All right.
So I have to hold my elbow up with the phone in front of my face.
All right, we're going to move through this quickly, okay?
Yeah.
One thing I want to catch you up on is that I think that what I see is you and I going on the road a little bit and meeting with Lee Newman and other powers that be to try and gain their support and the use of their resources in the updating of our CPC plan. And that's something that you and I will go on the road in September and October. Okay.
Yes, all right.
Okay. So, all right. So that's our update on Emery Grover. And next up is, all right, any other questions regarding Emery Grover? Jean?
If I may, I have had a concern for quite a while about Emery Grover, and particularly with the three goals of this committee, being historic preservation, community housing, and open space. It's my understanding that the plan for Emery Grover that is now being considered the number one plan, the preferred plan, involves using Stephen Palmer land for parking to support the Emery Grover building and its parking needs. And I don't understand how that works with the preservation of the Emery Grover site, if not the building, as a community housing resource. And I'd really like to know better whether one precludes the other. And then also, whenever one thinks of new construction, or people are concerned about Greens Field and any impact at all on Greens Field. So I see there's three programs of ours being affected one way or another with the proposed design of Emery Grover.
All right, so what you're pointing to is the use of parking at the Stephen Palmer building, which is contiguous to Greens Field. And
Yes.
that if they use the parking as basically a permanent facility for parking, that you're saying that that could potentially take away a resource that we could use for affordable housing.
Yes, because that building is presently on a long-term lease.
Mhm.
I've been told that the lease only has a few more years to go. So I'm assuming that it was originally a 50-year lease, and the town will have to decide what to do at that point to preserve this as, I think what's referred to in the Community Preservation Act as community housing, often called affordable housing. And as everyone knows, I think that building needs either substantial renovation or to be demolished and rebuilt. It has no elevators, no handicapped access. So I'll leave it at that, but it's a concern of competing priorities.
Okay, so okay, that's fine. It's probably when the time comes, that should be a discussion point, but it's a little bit of an issue that the housing, remember, we get applications and we make a determination of funding. We look in terms of priorities, we look for the stakeholders basically to come to us. And that's part of the reason why we're going to the stakeholders now and asking them for what their priorities are in terms of amending our plan. So, I think that's something that, affordable housing advocates, whatever that constituency group is, should be aware of, that it could potentially take a resource away.
Mhm.
But I don't know. You raise an interesting question. I just don't know if we should be agreeing to fund or not fund Emery Grover, because part of it involves taking away a potential resource for affordable housing. I guess we'd have to look at what the advocates for that say. And we do kind of adjudicate, right, these issues, but we'd have to hear from them rather than sit here and be kind of an advocate on their behalf. I kind of view it that way. Could be,
Okay.
could be
That's
wrong.
fair. That's fair. I'm new to the committee.
No,
Thank you.
There's enough flexibility in the law and what our role is that, when I tell people to try to stay in their lane, they can actually push back on me and say, no, I actually think this is our lane, that's right. So something to consider. We'll think about that.
Peter, last year, there was some discussions about the Stephen Palmer building being a potential site for some money by the Affordable Housing Trust, which falls into the select board's lap. And they had that on their radar screen, or at least a couple of the select board members did. had that on their radar screen because I think the lease is up in 5 years maybe. And there was some discussion about, at what point do you buy out the rest of the lease? Do you address the tenants who are living there now? That type of thing. I think it's also used for parking in the area for some of the people. I'm not sure, but I think some of the there's some arrangement for parking there, and I'm not sure with who. But
You're right.
Okay, and then last thing is, Gene, just be aware of that issue and don't be afraid to bring it up when we start interfacing with these various departments about what their goals are, okay?
Yes, okay,
Right?
thank you.
Okay.
I will.
All right, so now, any other further comments on our agenda items? All right, so now what we're gonna do is move on to First Baptist Church. And I think all of you may have been aware or heard that First Baptist Church has suspended having services. I think that, but the question really is, what is the status of the church? And then related to that is, if it no longer functions, if it's no longer functioning as the First Baptist Church, what impact, if any, does that have on the grant that we provided to First Baptist Church? And so what I've asked, Cecilia and I have talked about this leading up to this meeting. Asked Cecilia is going to fill us in because I think she's going to provide us with some additional background information on what's going on with First Baptist Church. And we also had town council on our contract. And the committee, Gene, just to let you know, the committee we were, let's call us a very active client in connection with the agreement with the First Baptist Church. So we were involved quite a bit, but we had town council on the contract as well. All right, so Cecilia, can you provide us with an update?
Yeah, so I have been trying to get in touch with somebody from the church who submitted the application, and so far all I've been able to talk to is the project manager on this, who's not affiliated with the church at all, but was hired by them to coordinate it. And his understanding has been that they're still moving forward with the project. I briefed Chris Heap, our town council, on the situation, and he said, once I can confirm that they're still moving forward, send him everything and he'll review it in detail. But his kind of preliminary understanding was that it shouldn't be a problem because we're still, them being a church actually had nothing to do with the structure being repaired.
I think, go ahead, Rick.
yeah, Peter, after you and my conversation earlier, I did a little research on this, and the church voted, I believe it was on June 7th, to go to this restructured proposal and not to conduct regular service on Sundays. They're going to meet once a month and have a service.
Okay.
But they also voted, and there's a little paragraph in there that even if the church dissolves, they're planning starting this September to go forward with the project to fund it and to complete all the work on the front portico and facade and everything. And as it's described in there as a gift to the town, even though the town's paying for part of it, they're also going to continue to contribute money to have it restored.
Mm-hmm.
So following up on our conversation, irrespective of whether it's a church, a restaurant, a bar, a meeting house, as long as the work is done and they restore the historical aspects of the church, then our role is done, really.
So I don't know if we can change the terms of our agreement, but if it were a bar, then we actually could have put an actual historic, I'm going to mangle the language. Gene will know this better than I, but an actual historic preservation restriction on it. Is that what we call that, Gene?
Yes, it is. And is there a reason we don't have that for this project?
Because if you look at the town of Acton case, there's a lot in that case, but one of the elements of it is that if we had put in that kind of restriction, we could have run afoul of our whatever our elements of our state constitution establish a separation of church and state. I just can't recall offhand, but basically that was also in that case. So
But,
as a result, and so that's why we were kind of we kind of zigged and zagged in that contract. And what we have is a clawback provision, which says that if they make any change, I think the clawback provision was if they make changes, then we get our money back. But if there's a sale, I guess, you know what, I'm stretching my memory. I can't remember if there's a sale that we actually have clawback rights. We don't. It's just if there's a change
Hey, Rick,
in the historic structure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Rick, maybe you'll remember this. I remember we were talking about a clawback. I remember we were talking about a timeline. At some point, there was a comment made that the value of that money at that timeline, let's say 10 years, doesn't really have any value at all. So why put that on there? But I do not remember if we still kept some type of timeline. I don't remember. I like you, Pete. I don't remember what it was, but we had talked about doing something. If it was sold and torn down, are we getting our money back, for example? That was being talked about. If the building is
Yeah.
I should have pulled up the agreement, and so I apologize. I should have.
Yeah, I think, Adi, you're correct, but regardless, I just mentioned the date and the fact that they were going forward in September. And I think based on that knowledge, we just need to have town council pull out the agreement and make sure that the town's rights are protected under that and rely on town council's opinion.
Right, I agree with you. And I don't think we're in a position to rework the agreement. So I think we should just rely on what we have in place. We had built in some contingencies. And so
We did, and I don't remember what they were.
I don't remember what they were, but
I have to interpret it.
well, I
anyway.
mean, one was last money. One was last money in, I believe. That was last money.
Can the agreement, after this meeting, just to help me catch up, could it be sent out? I'd very much like to review it myself.
Sure. So do we have the final? I can't remember if I have the final in my directory. Well, maybe we could send it all out. Let's send it out to the committee.
Yeah, I'll grab a copy of the signed version. I have the unsigned version. I was sent out handy readily, but I'll grab a copy of the signed version and can send it out.
And Kristen, it needs to be recorded in the Registry of Deeds, correct? I assume that has happened also.
Maybe. The historic part does, I'm pretty sure, but that would be through the historical commission, I believe.
So, Jean, why do you think it needs to be recorded?
Well, I'm thinking of the Community Preservation Act and the requirement that if funds are spent on historic preservation, there be a historic preservation restriction. That is.
There is no historic preservation restriction on this because of the.
All right, I need to get further background.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't want to spend time when my understanding is incomplete.
Okay, let's just start by getting the agreement out.
Yeah.
And then Chris should be able to advise us now. We know what's going on. They're meeting monthly. They're going forward with the project. That's, those facts seem pretty much set. They don't have regular services. They're still ongoing. They're meeting monthly. They plan on going forward with the project. Okay. Any other comments on our First Baptist Church update? All right. Do we have? I don't know. We don't have minutes yet, do we, Kristen? Do we have minutes from? No. All right. We'll get to those.
If we could stop having hurricanes, it'd be real great. Like, there's a lot of prep that goes into hurricanes around here, and it just.
Did we have a hurricane?
Yeah.
Oh,
Did we?
Okay.
Did we?
I don't know.
I had a chair tip over, so I think one of my chairs tipped over. So
you have to prepare for it one way or the other. If there's going to be a hurricane, you have to prepare for it. If there's no hurricane after you prepare for it, you still had to prepare for it. Right, Cecilia?
Okay.
All right. So now, any other issues? Okay. So let's just plan on meeting on 9/5, and let's say up in the air are tentative meetings for 10, 20, and 11, 17. We may potentially adjourn for those 2 months.
Peter, 9/5 and
Excuse me.
9/15.
I wrote down 9/5. I must be 9/15. What does it say here?
9/5 is a Sunday.
Yeah, sorry.
9:15.
All right, I see. It's 9:50. Sorry, thanks. Thank you, Joe. And Rick,
Peter, one
Rick.
more
Yeah, sure.
question.
Sure.
I believe, and this probably is a question for Jean. I believe the planning board was out looking for a couple people to participate on their planning process for zoning
Yes.
changes or whatever.
Yes,
Is our participation in that process through Jean?
oh, good question. I haven't been leading that effort, and I know they were looking for two more or less members of the public, and I communicated with the League of Women Voters to make sure they were aware of that, and with Equal Justice Needham, make sure they're aware of that, you know. But as far as which committees of the town, I don't have that in my head. Why don't I find out? But if nobody, if Peter, if you haven't been contacted, then it may be that this committee was not considered one that they wanted to have, make sure they had a spot for. But what is the committee's wish in that regard? And
Well, the only reason why I bring it up is because if some of those changes have an impact on requests to fund projects that this committee would have financial oversight on evaluating, I think it would probably be important that at least we be informed, maybe not necessarily participate, but at least be informed of some of the changes and the potential impact on the financing of affordable housing through this committee.
yes, I know that we're going to be focusing on what our zoning provisions are for multifamily housing in our several business zones. And where do we require a certain percentage of affordable units to be part of the project? And should we boost that? Should we have it as a requirement in places where we don't have it now? There hasn't, just in general discussion about what the committee's goals are. I don't think it had to do with seeking town funding for affordable housing, but it could very well go in that direction. You know, we want this to be open-ended and get ideas. But so I keep that in mind, Rick, that this committee should be involved. And if not having a member serve on the Affordable Housing Study Committee, should be kept informed of what it's doing. Is that the idea, Rick?
Yeah, right. That was my thought, but I just threw it out for discussion, really. I knew, I was aware of there was a couple openings, and I just was concerned we just increased the funding bucket for affordable housing, and we're probably going to do that next year as well. I know when Reg gets here, he's got a number of projects that are supposedly being teed up for spending money. You've got the Affordable Housing Trust. You know, if they're talking about Stephen Palmer, there's going to be some other locations that people are going to be proposing, in which case they may come to us for funding under the affordable housing bucket. So just more information purposes would be my thought for the time being. I defer that though to the chair.
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
have been asked personally to serve on this committee. And since I'm on your committee, we can make it a regular agenda item that I report. That's one way.
So, and heard of it, and I guess the first question that I have is, well, how did they determine what committees would have representation on this plan? Now, I see Kristen's hand is up. So Kristen, let's hear from Kristen.
Just through my other role in town, it's made up of 2 members of the planning board, 2 members from housing, 2 members from select board, 2 at-large members, as well as a representative from Board of Health, Council on Aging, Finance Committee, and Park and Rec. That was sent by the Director of Planning and Community Development.
Thank you,
That's
Kristen.
the committee. That's what the committee is going to be comprised of. The plan, the key components of the plan would include an executive summary that highlights the key takeaways from the plan, a list of community housing goals that would include the results of the visioning process as a part of the first community housing workshop, a housing need assessment that provides documentation on key indicators of need, a strategic action plan that includes the actions that the town will pursue to promote greater housing diversity and affordability, including the timeline for implementation and responsible entities, a list of local and regional housing organizations and entities, a glossary of housing terms, and a summary of housing related regulations and resources.
I would love to see that document. I don't mean to put,
It's included in the Park and Rec commission packet from Monday, the 23rd.
Okay, so we have committee members who are kind of, kind of looking to get involved in that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't want to put Laura Dorfman on the spot, but that she's kind of expressed an interest in dealing with these kinds of issues of availability of housing. Laura was the person who kind of came to the committee and talked to us about the emergency rental assistance program and maybe kind of push that within the committee itself. So we might have, I don't want to put Laura on the spot. I don't know what her interest or appetite or bandwidth is right now, but we may have somebody on our committee who might be interested in participating either as potentially as an at-large, public at-large member, or even if a representative of CPC, if they can expand the participating committees. Again, I don't mean to put Laura on the spot, but I'm just hearing about this now, and I figured it's an efficient way of dealing with it. Laura, if asked, would you serve?
Of course.
See, there you go.
Okay, Laura. I'll send you, Laura, the 1 paragraph, we're seeking at-large members, so that you can respond and know how to respond to the planning director on that. And if that's the way this goes. Now, we're not meeting. Planning boards meet next meeting. Oh, gee. Should have it in my head. Is September maybe 13th or something. And so we won't be discussing it as a board until our next meeting.
Okay.
But to get your name in, if you do want to serve as an at-large member, and then the board could discuss, if there are other candidates, the possibility, well, if we simply added to the committee, the Community Preservation Committee, which certainly is appropriate with their funding role, then Laura would most likely be the person named to the committee. So why don't I talk with the planning director as soon as I can about that, and then and I'll send the email as I said I would.
Okay, that would be great. So it's either they add someone from the CPC, or if not, it would be an at-large position. Okay, so I should wait to hear from you.
Yes, and I'll try to get out at least that email. I should think I'd be able to do that tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, Rick, thanks for bringing that up.
My computer does work in 10-minute spurts, and then it turns itself off. And anyway, we'll see.
Okay. Okay, Rick, thank you for bringing that up. And that was timely. And all right, so let's see, so now we're going to adjourn. Now remember, our next meeting is 9/15, September 15th. And we have to do roll call votes for adjournment. So can I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so the motion was made by Rick Zambone and it was seconded by Chris Gerson. Okay, and we'll have a roll call vote. Joe Barnes,
Aye.
Artie Crocker,
Bye.
Chris Gerson,
Aye.
Laura Dorfman.
Aye.
Gene McKnight,
Aye.
Rick Zambone,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. We are adjourned and we will meet again at 9:15. Cecilia, send out that agreement to all of us. And we'll follow up with the committee appointment or committee with Laura Dorfman being involved. Okay,
Enjoy the rest of the summer, folks.
thanks.
Okay.
Chris-
All right, good night.
Kristen-
Thank you.
Chris-
Okay.
Kristen,
Thanks,
Kristen,
Steve.
thank you for your help.
Yeah, Chris.